How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Presented by Bogey Studios, in association with Maluckins Media Group. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. Could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, Grinchy frown at the warm, lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now, hanging a mistletoe wreath.
And they're hanging their stockings,
he snarled with a sneer.
Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here.
Then he growled, with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming.
I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming.
For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys. And then, the noise. The noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise. Then the Who's young and old would sit down to a feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast. And they'd feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together, with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought,
I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how?
Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea.
I know just what to do.
The Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked.
What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer.
The Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No. The Grinch simply said,
If I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. Yeah!
So he called his dog Max, then he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. And then the Grinch said,
Get up!
And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Whos lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square.
This is stop number 1.
The old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch. But if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row.
These stockings,
he grinned,
are the first things to go. Hiya!
Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant, around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimbley. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee.
And now,
Grinned the Grinch.
I will stuff up the tree.
And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound, like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said,
Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?
But you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick.
Why, my sweet little tot,
The fake Santa Claus lied.
there's a light on this tree that won't, light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there. Then I'll bring it back here.
And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it.
Pooh-pooh to the Who's.
He was Grinchiously humming.
They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Oh, their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. Yeah. That's a noise.
Grinned the Grinch.
That I simply must hear.
So he paused.
Huh?
And the Grinch put his hand to his ear.
Wait for it.
And he did hear a sound rising over the snow.
Oh, yeah, here it comes.
It started in low.
Any minute now.
Then it started to grow.
Now we're cooking.
But
Yep, here we go.
the sound wasn't sad.
Wait, what?
Why, this sound sounded merry.
Hold the show.
It couldn't be so, but it was merry.
That sounds merry.
Very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came, somehow or other. It came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling.
How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags.
And he puzzled 3 hours, till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before.
Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more.
And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast.
All right! Merry Christmas! Now who wants a drumstick? I gotta tell ya, you guys really threw me for a loop. You folks are actually all right by me. All right!
The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. One winter morning, Peter woke up and looked out the window. Snow had fallen during the night. It covered everything as far as he could see. After breakfast, he put on his snowsuit and ran outside. The snow was piled up very high along the street to make a path for walking. Crunch, crunch, crunch. His feet sank into the snow. He walked with his toes pointing out, like this. He walked with his toes pointing in, like that. Then he dragged his feet slowly to make tracks, and he found something sticking out of the snow that made a new track. It was a stick that was just right for smacking a snow-covered tree. Down fell the snow, plop, on top of Peter's head. He thought it would be fun to join the big boys in their snowball fight, but he knew he wasn't old enough. Not yet. So he made a smiling snowman, and he made angels. He pretended he was a mountain climber. He climbed up a great big tall heaping mountain of snow and slid all the way down. He picked up a handful of snow and another and still another. He packed it round and firm and put the snowball in his pocket for tomorrow. Then he went into his warm house. He told his mother all about his adventures while she took off his wet socks. And he thought and thought and thought about them. Before he got into bed, he looked into his pocket. His pocket was empty. The snowball wasn't there. He felt very sad. While he slept, he dreamt that the sun had melted all the snow away. But when he woke up, his dream was gone. The snow was still everywhere. New snow was falling. After breakfast, he called to his friend from across the hall, and they went out together into the deep, deep snow. The end. Corduroy by Don Freeman. Story and pictures by Don Freeman. Corduroy is a bear who once lived in the toy department of a big store. Day after day he waited with all the other animals and dolls for somebody to come along and take him home. The store was always filled with shoppers buying all sorts of things. No one ever seemed to want a small bear in green overalls. Then one morning, a little girl stopped and looked straight into Corduroy's bright eyes.
Oh, Mommy!
She said,
Look, there's a fairy bear I've always wanted.
Not today, dear.
Her mother sighed.
I spent too much already. Besides, he doesn't look new. He's lost the button to one of his shoulder straps.
Corduroy watched them sadly as they walked away. I didn't know I'd lost a button, he said to himself. Tonight I'll go and see if I can find it. Late that evening, when all the shoppers had gone and the doors were shut and locked, Corduroy climbed carefully down from his shelf and began searching everywhere on the floor for his lost button. Suddenly, he felt the floor moving under him. Quite by accident, he had stepped onto an escalator, and up he went. Could this be a mountain? He wondered. I think I've always wanted to climb a mountain. He stepped off the escalator as it reached the next floor, and there, before his eyes, was a most amazing sight. Tables and chairs and lamps and sofas and rows of beds. This must be a palace, Corduroy gasped. I guess I've always wanted to live in a palace. He wandered around admiring the furniture. This must be a bed, he said. I've always wanted to sleep in a bed. And up he crawled onto a large, thick mattress. All at once, he saw something small and round. Why, here's my button, he cried. And he tried to pick it up, but, like all the other buttons on the mattress, it was tied down tight. He yanked and pulled with both paws until, pop! Off came the button, and off the mattress Corduroy toppled. Bang into a tall floor lamp. Over it fell with a crash. But Corduroy didn't know it. There was someone else awake in the store. The night watchman was going his rounds on the floor above. When he heard the crash, he came dashing down the escalator. Now, who in the world did that? He exclaimed. Somebody must be hiding around here. He flashed his light under and over sofas and beds until he came to the biggest bed of all. There he saw two fuzzy brown ears sticking up from under the cover. Hello, he said. How did you get upstairs? The watchman tucked Corduroy under his arm and carried him down the escalator. And set him on the shelf in the toy department with the other animals and dolls. Corduroy was just waking up when the first customers came into the store in the morning. And there, looking at him with a wide, warm smile, was the same little girl he'd seen only the day before.
I'm Lisa,
She said,
and you're gonna be my very own bear. Last night, I counted what I've saved in my piggy bank, and my mother said I could bring it home.
Shall I put him in a box for you? The sales lady asked.
No thank you.
Lisa answered, and she carried Corduroy home in her arms. She ran all the way up 4 flights of stairs into her family's apartment and straight to her own room. Corduroy blinked. There was a chair and a chest of drawers, and alongside a girl-sized bed stood a little bed just the right size for him. Now, the room was small, nothing like that enormous palace in the department store. This must be home, he said. I know I've always wanted a home. Lisa sat down with Corduroy on her lap, began to sew a button on his overalls.
I like you the way you are,
She said,
but you'll be more comfortable with your shoulder strap fastened.
"You must be a friend," said Corduroy. "I've always wanted a friend,"
Me too.
said Lisa, and gave him a big hug. The end. This has been a Bogey Studios and Maluckins Media Group listening experience.